I didn't grow up with a Sega console in my household, but The Haunting starring Polterguy is one of those oddball Sega exclusive games that makes me wish I would've. It has a unique gameplay style and a premise that's hilarious and creepy all at the same time. The story here is that you play as the Polterguy, the ghost of a teenager who died in a skateboarding accident. Okay, that sounds morbid and awful, but hear me out, there's a punchline. The manual quite clearly lays out the backstory about how these faulty, cheaply made skateboards were produced in a shoddy, overseas factory by a slimy company. The corporation is ran by this scuzzball Vito Sardini. What a name. Sardini slashed costs wherever he could using cheap parts, automated assembly lines, you name it, and his lawyers used all sorts of tricks to hide the nature of his company so he could get out of a wrongful death suit. The manual goes out of its way to make sure you don't feel bad about what you're about to do to this guy. Polterguy decides to take out revenge on Sardini and his family by haunting their home, scaring the living crap out of them, and sending them running and screaming out the door. I'm not really sure what this guy's kids have to do with anything, but they seem like spoiled little brats, so I guess it's okay. If this story sounds familiar, then you've probably seen the 1988 movie Beetlejuice, and I'm about to go on a side tangent. For those of you that haven't seen the movie, Beetlejuice stars Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin before he ate one of his siblings as a small-town couple who tragically die in a car accident only to come back as ghosts. Once they realize they're dead, they try to leave their home but immediately discover that they're trapped inside forever. At first, this doesn't seem like a bad way to spend eternity, just trapped in their old house, but soon after, another still very living family buys the home. The new family is an obnoxious big city family, so Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis decide to try to scare them into moving away. They pull off a few cheap parlor tricks, including a memorable dinner scare, but nothing really shakes off the family, and at one point the couple considers hiring Beetlejuice, a self-proclaimed bioexorcist played by Michael Keaton who specializes in getting rid of the living. One funny thing about this movie, although it's called Beetlejuice and is totally marketed around Keaton's performance, Michael Keaton only appears on screen as Beetlejuice for 17 minutes of the movie's entire 93-minute runtime. Okay, I'm getting way off track here. I could go on all day about this, and maybe I should start a side channel where I just talk about really old movies all the time. Anyway, there's a scene in the movie where Beetlejuice takes over a staircase banister and turns into a giant horrifying snake and scares the hell out of everybody. I feel like that scene and the dinner scene and a couple of the other scenes are really the main inspiration for the gameplay elements in Haunting starring Polterguy. So you play as the Polterguy in a top-down isometric view, which right away is an abrupt change from what you usually see on a home console game. There are a few console games like this, such as The Immortal, but usually this is reserved for PC RPGs such as Diablo or complex simulators such as The Sims. That's really what this game feels like. Beetlejuice meets The Sims. I really love the colorful art style as well as the detailed character animations, which you'll see are pretty far-fetched and very well done. So you're wandering around the house where Vito Sardini and his family live, and you're trying to scare them into running out of the home. The family can't actually see Polterguy, so you have to scare them by possessing various objects or items around the house, which the game calls frightums. There are all sorts of items in the house that can be used as frightums, and like I said before, this is similar to what they did in Beetlejuice with the snake scene on the staircase. Virtually any item can be a frightum. A vacuum sweeper popping out of the kitchen closet, a poster of a ninja coming to life, a frozen cat popping out of the freezer and chasing them around the room, just all sorts of wacky stuff. This game finds just the right balance between horror and humor, and part of what makes it so fun is the animation and sound effects of the family as you're scaring them out of their wits. You might literally scare the pants off of them, and their fear meter is outlined in the corner. You activate a frightum by pressing A when you're near one of these shimmering objects. Blue frightums will go off automatically if one of the family members gets close to it. Yellow frightums involve a bit more timing as you have to be possessing the object when the family member is nearby. And the green frightums let you actually take physical control of an item for a brief period of time. For example, when you activate this table saw in the garage, you can take over a severed hand and chase the family around the room, just totally scaring the crap out of them. This isn't all just scaring the family members though, there's some strategy involved. For starters, you can only use a frightum once, so you'll need to put some thought into how and when you load up the frightums while the family member is in the room. You can press start to bring up a map which shows where each of the family members are located throughout the house, as well as shows where all the exits are. Remember, you're trying to get them to exit the house. Like here, for instance, I kept jumping the gun and activating the frightums in the kitchen too soon, causing Flo to run back into one of the other rooms of the house instead of running out the back door. So you have to pay attention to your timing here. There's also an ectoplasm bar at the bottom which sorta acts like a timer. You can't spend too much time goofing off or this will run down to 0. If you scare one of the family members out of a room, they'll extrude some ectoplasm which you can pick up to replenish this bar. You'll have to spend a little ectoplasm to activate each frightem, so you'll want to pick and choose which ones you activate depending on where the exits are and where the family members are in the room. If your ectoplasm runs down to 0, and inevitably it will, you'll drop down into what the manual calls the dungeon level. I guess this is purgatory? You'll have to run through these dank hallways dodging monsters or stuff that shoots up out of the walls and floors, all while scooping up ectoplasm that drops onto the ground. In the later stages, you can also pick up spells in this area too. Once you've scooped up all of the ectoplasm, a portal will open up and take you back into the house. It's worth noting that the dungeon areas are the only place where Polterguy can die again, I guess? And there are no saves or continues, so you'll need to be careful here. Things get more challenging back in the real world too. Eventually the family's dog shows up and the dog can actually see Polterguy. He can ruin your traps, lower your ectoplasm by barking, as well as calm the family's fear. There's also other monsters that can show up which the manual calls ecto-beasts. They'll try and run in to steal ectoplasm that the family members leave behind. You can press B to try to kick these guys and make them go away, although it's better to just grab the ecto and run, to be honest. I mentioned spells. You can press C to bring up the spell menu, and there are a few to choose from. You can use a spell on the dog to distract him so you can keep scaring the family. There's a fireball spell, which actually lets you start hucking fireballs at the family to scare them, and there's a spell to replenish your ectoplasm one time only. There was also a super scare spell, although the family was stubborn and never took the bait whenever I tried this. And if you've got a friend, there's a 2-player mode. So yeah, overall, The Haunting starring Polterguy is one of the most unique games I've ever played from this era. I can't really think of anything else like it. I guess there was a game called Ghostmaster for PS2 which had a similar premise, but I've never played that one. The colorful graphics are excellent and the over-the-top animations make the game tons of fun, but they're also very impressive given what all they crammed into one cartridge. Part of the motivation to keep progressing through the game is just to see what all crazy stuff the programmers put in there, and there are 4 houses in total to play through, each with their own unique frightums. The dungeons kinda suck. The play control's really loose, and with the isometric view and the way the ectoplasm falls, it's tough to see where the ectoplasm's gonna land, and I feel like I end up having to backtrack more often than I should. But that's really my only complaint about this game. The spooky music and sound effects also really add to the ambiance. Horror fans should definitely be pleased with this one, although it's different enough to be fun even if you're not necessarily a fan of that genre. And certainly fans of the Beetlejuice movie should seek this one out as well. Heck, Haunting starring Polterguy is more of a Beetlejuice game than any of the actual Beetlejuice video games were. Well, that's all for this week. What did you think of this one? Did you play The Haunting starring Polterguy growing up, or maybe discover it more recently? What are some other Sega Genesis games you'd like me to take a look at some point down the road? As always, I want to thank you for watching. Please don't text and drive, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.